Joining me right now is Kentucky Senator, Senate Foreign Relations Committee and Homeland and Governmental Affairs Committee member Rand Paul. Senator, it's great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. You didn't want to spend any more money, right? You're looking at $22 trillion in debt and raising your hand, one of the few to do so in the Senate.
Well, it's not that I don't want to spend any more money. It's that we have no money. I mean, we're on a normal budget year. We borrow about $1 trillion, which was already a big problem for us. But then we've added $3 trillion in borrowing this spring. Now we're on par or on goal to set to borrow maybe another $1 trillion or two, and it's money we don't have. So the virus came from China. Now we're borrowing money from China to pay for the virus. It isn't good for the country. It doesn't make us stronger. And ultimately, there will be repercussions. In fact, I talk to investors every day who say there are undercurrents of real worry about adding so much debt in such a short period of time, and that perhaps the stock market's rise is illusory, and that there will be a correction as people begin to realize how much of the unemployment may stick with us for a long time.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're raising this, and you continue to be the person with the responsibility, awareness of this federal deficit and its impact. Ted Cruz also raising his hand about this skyrocketing deficit during the coronavirus pandemic, reaching $2.8 trillion between October 19 and July, a 224% increase from the same period last year in terms of the deficit. Senator, what is the solution then? How do you get the economy back up and running, get the money that people need to feel secure to go back to work?
Well, first of all, if you're going to pass out free money, you should pay for it. And one way to pay for it, I have an amendment that would actually pay for another $2 trillion or the previous $2 trillion. And that would be simply freezing federal spending for 3 years. I think that's the least we can do. But ask your Democrat guests how many will vote for it, and ask your Republican leadership guests how many people will vote for a freeze. But a 3-year freeze prevents us from spending an additional $2.5 trillion and actually would pay for this in a responsible way. And I think Wall Street would respond very favorably if you were to say, you know what, we've done this in this dire circumstances, but we're going to pay for it by freezing spending. I think Wall Street would say, my goodness, that's for the first time in forever Congress is actually acting responsibly. But in addition, you have to open the economy. Here's my fear. Because fear mongering is spread throughout the media, on many of the different channels, we're going to get to November or December, and if the economy's still closed and these governors and everybody's still going hysterical and saying we can't open the schools and we can't do this, you know what's going to happen in November or December? They're going to come back and want another $1 trillion or $2 trillion. We can't keep doing this. When you print money or the Fed creates money or we borrow it, there are repercussions. I talked to a fairly wealthy investor the other day who said that they are very, very concerned, and they think it's already baked in that Wall Street is beginning to know and to understand what the ramifications of all this borrowing will be on our currency, the value of our currency. They point to gold at about $2,000 an ounce and gone up dramatically in the last year as people already hedging their bet against the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, this is one issue that basically makes the U.S. more reliant on China, right? And here we are in an economic soft war with them in terms of many of the behaviors that we've seen. I want to take a break with you, but come back, Senator, and talk more about what you would expect from the Chinese Communist Party in such an environment as we have rates at rock bottom levels and $22 trillion in debt. Stay with us. We're talking with Senator Rand Paul, and we'll be right back with more. Welcome back. And back with me this morning is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, and we're talking about 2020 and the economy. And, Senator, we're talking about all of this debt and the process right now of coming up with more stimulus. That means spending more money. Markets have not cared about this because we have got 0% interest rates, so you're not seeing the cost of holding this debt. But markets don't care until they care, right? And then you have a market disruption. What are your thoughts on the debt that we have right now and this ability to spend more money and impact markets and the economy?
You could have said the same thing between 2002 and 2007, that the market didn't care about everybody buying homes with 0 interest, 0% down, and that didn't care until they cared. And you're exactly right. All of a sudden they cared. And what happens with the markets, from my perspective, is that it becomes like the tale of the emperor has no clothes. When they finally discover that the emperor has no clothes, they go, oh my goodness, the emperor has no clothes, and they scoot away from these investments. And you have dramatic things happen in the market. I mean, there's gradualism in the market, but there are also dramatic things. So right now, the Federal Reserve manipulates interest rates. I don't think that they are true market interest rates. They keep them very low. The government can borrow lots of money and pay it back at a very small amount as far as the fees. However, there comes a time when I think the Federal Reserve cannot control interest rates. One indication already, though, that the market is not complacent about the debts is the price of gold. Gold price is probably up 40% in the last year or more, or maybe higher than that. But gold at $2,000 an ounce is an indication that at least a certain percentage of the investors are covering their butts on this, that are concerned about what happens. And what I don't want to see is an unraveling of the currency where everybody says we're so strong, we're the reserve currency. We literally are the cleanest shirt in a closet full of dirty shirts. And there is a time in which people recognize that. And I don't know if it happens gradually that other currencies rise to prominence or if it happens suddenly. But I don't want to see us have Zimbabwe's currency anytime soon.
Senator, let me ask you about Kamala Harris. You've worked with Senator Harris in the Senate for years. They held their first appearance as running mates. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did yesterday. They both slammed President Trump and his handling of the economy. But the president told me moments ago that if Biden was elected, we could see the greatest economic depression in history. Your thoughts on what we need to know about Senator Kamala Harris as the vice presidential pick? And will we actually see a recovery in the economy should the president get reelected? What is the impact under Vice President Biden?
You know, a few years ago, I worked with her on some reforms, and we did work pretty well together. As we've gotten closer to the election, I think it's harder for her to work with me, and we've tried very hard in recent times to fix one of the bills she's advocated for, and it's ended up being more symbolism and partisan red meat she's thrown back, and an inability really to actually talk with my office. We've tried repeatedly to talk to her in her office, and we get no feedback. We only get public sort of admonition that we're somehow a racist or something that I think is very unfair. And I think that's a dumbing down of things that happen as you get close to elections. I do think the Democrats made a good choice in the sense that I think they need to reassure their voters that should Biden's mental health and mental faculties not be sufficient, that there's someone younger who's mentally able and agile enough to occupy the office. And I think that is a concern, and more for people in the middle. They will be concerned as the debates unfold whether or not President or a future or possible President Biden has the mental faculties to run the country. And so I think that will become a more significant issue as we get to the debates. And I think they're petrified of the debates because I think President Trump will run circles around Joe Biden.
So what you're saying is we should really be looking at Kamala Harris as a potential president. Should Joe Biden step back for any reason, maybe the cognitive issues, we should really be looking at Kamala Harris differently than we've looked at past vice presidential candidates.
Yeah, I think there's a much higher percentage chance that she would have to fill the role and duty of the presidency. But I also think that we should be looking at Biden's sort of a belief that he has to buy off certain constituencies on the left. So his sort of trying to get the Bernie Sanders vote, he's having to become so progressive that even though he says he's not for defund the police, he's just for shifting the money around. And so, when somebody interviewed the president, I can't remember, and they said, oh, well, Mr. President, Biden's really not for defunding the police. Well, he has said he will shift the dollars around. How is that different than defunding the police? I think he has accepted a lot of the agenda of the radical left. And I think there is a middle part of America that isn't very partisan, doesn't watch the news channels, doesn't talk politics all the time, but that is worried about their safety. And, I think there's a large portion of the African-American population that lives in Chicago that has felt left behind for so long with the violence in the streets that nobody seems to care about the teenage kids that have been killed in Chicago time and time again.
Unbelievable. You're right. You make a lot of important points. Senator, thank you, sir. We will see you soon. Senator Rand Paul.